Who were you before the stage, before the books, before the reputation?
Oh, I was a lost little boy.
When you transition from music world to speaking world, how being in the music world helped you actually?
It helped me tremendously because I have no fear of an audience, because I've been in front of an audience my whole life.
Would you say that you're then different man on the stage and off the stage?
That's an excellent question, and I think everybody is to a certain degree. Some people are to a huge degree. Some people, I see them when they're on the stage, they turn into somebody completely different.
Do you believe that everybody can be a public speaker, keynote speaker, or selling from the stage?
No, not everybody can. No, and there are people that.
Is there a belief you had to unlearn to become who you are today?
Yeah, many of them. Many. There were many beliefs I had to
Can you give
unlearn.
me any?
Yeah, I can tell you some, and some of them, I still work on today. 63 years old, and I still work on my belief systems.
My question to you is, have you ever felt bad or had any wrong belief exiting on the stage? That people do not listen to you, or they're not connected, they're not interested, and how overcome these moments if you ever had that?
Oh yeah, I've had it many times. And so the reason why that happens, I mean, there are a number of reasons, but for me, when I look back on it, and there was one recently actually, where it's the wrong audience.
How do you use story not just to inspire, but to convert? How do you think AI will reshape the art of public speaking, and will it actually touch in there or not? How do you think that experts can preserve their authenticity when automation is everywhere? Guys, I need to say something. We're building something really special here. The level of guests, the conversations, the depth we are going in week by week, it's becoming better and better, more and more valuable. But there is one thing which doesn't make any sense. Almost 90% of you who keep watching the episodes, who keep coming back week by week, are not subscribed yet. Which means one thing. You're not fully part of that journey. I get it. It's one click. It feels small. But for us, and myself personally, means everything. It tells the algorithm that we matter. It helps us reach bigger guests and create better and better podcast episodes, which at the end of the day are equally for myself like for yourself. They bring the value. So if there was ever a moment to support us, I please you to do it right now. Check if you're subscribed, and if you're not, it's completely free. It doesn't mean to you that much like it means to us. Just click the subscribe button, and by that way, you will help us grow bigger and bigger. And what I can promise you is that me and my team will continue making improves, and very soon move ourselves to the real studio where we will record even more powerful episodes with same and new guests. Check, are you subscribed? And subscribe right now. Thank you. Steve, thank you so much for being here today with me.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This is really exciting for me because I've been watching some of your podcasts, and I know a lot of the people that you've interviewed. So I'm very excited to be here with you.
Thank you. When people say Steve Lowell, they can read a lot about that, about you, about your books, about your reputation. But who were you before the stage, before the books, before the reputation?
Oh, I was a lost little boy. So, well, not really. So I've been on the live stage since the age of 6 years old. So at 6 years old, yeah,
very early.
It was pretty early. I wasn't a professional speaker at 6 years old, but I was a bit of a guitar prodigy at 6 years old. A little skinny guy, big thick glasses, could barely reach over the guitar, but I was quite good. And so I was about 6 years old, and I started playing at the school at a variety show, and then I was on a local TV show, and people started to see me. And then by the time I was in my early teens, I had my own band. Now I wasn't the singer in the band, but I was the lead guitar player, and I was the front guy. So I was the one speaking with the audiences. That band turned professional, and then throughout my teens and into my early 20s, we traveled the country. We made some records, and so I was a musician, and I was a full-time musician for a lot of those years. And all of that time, I was the front man. So I loved to engage the audience and speak with the audience. Then what happened was the band, the band members, they leave and they go about their lives, and I was left all by myself. And so I had to learn to do some singing. So I ended up doing a solo show with just me and my guitar. And this is what I tell people. People ask me oftentimes, how did I, Steve, how did you get into speaking? So what I tell them is, people would come and hear me sing at the bars and at the pubs, and they would come up to me and they'd say, Steve, maybe you should just say the words. And so, so I became a speaker. But I stumbled on a video by Zig Ziglar. And I just fell in love with the whole concept of, like, here's this guy standing on a stage saying things. He has no equipment, he has no guitar, he has no bandmates, his audience isn't drunk, as far as I can tell, and all he's doing is saying things. And I thought, that sounds like a great job. So I just started pursuing that. So you asked me before the stage, there isn't really much before the stage because I hit the stage at the age of 6.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting for me. But can you tell me in what period of your life you had that band? That early, at the age of 6 or later on?
No, the band, my first band was my first year of high school. So when I was, before high school, I didn't have a band as much as I just played my guitar whenever somebody wanted me to. I wasn't professional at all. But there was a guy in high school who came and asked me if I wanted to join his band, and it was an Elvis impersonation band, and I was a huge Elvis fan, so I said, sure. So I joined that band, and that was not professional. We won some competitions and things, and we played at the schools, but that band kind of dismantled, and then other players came in, and that band became professional. So I was a professional musician by the time I was about I'm going to say about 16, 17 years old.
Teenager,
Now I was still in school, but we were playing pubs and we're playing places that I was too young to be in. And so we would play these places, and then as life went on, we got more professional, and we all left our jobs and started touring the country, and it just sort of rolled into that. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I had already traveled the country with the band and made some records and done some TV shows. But something what's interesting, Nick, is in the music business, you're either eating steak or you're eating craft dinner. And I don't know if you know those two references, but we were eating craft dinner and steak was nowhere in sight. We just weren't that good. We were fun and people liked us, but we weren't really good enough to make a career out of it. And so when that became apparent, that's when I went into speaking, because I found my gift in the speaking world, and I didn't really have the gift in the music world.
Whenever you come to the salesperson will tell you, I know how to help you. We are having perfect solution for you. But in fact, you have a great product, you have a great offer, you know that you can help so many people, but you're still inconsistent. Why it's like that? Because you misunderstand two basic principles. And let me tell you something, it's not economy, it's not war, it's not current president or political situation, none of that. Because simply you and money were always on the same planet Earth. You never left the planet, and most likely money never did it, right? The only two ways are the reason why it's like that. Number one thing which can be the reason is that you don't know the right way of presenting your offer. Number two can be that you don't know the proper way to whom to present it, which boils down to you don't know to whom to sell, or you don't know the right way to speak to the people to whom to sell. I have been scaling in the past 10 years multiple of my own companies and companies of my clients from $0 to $200,000 in sales, being in China, selling physical, perishable items like food and beverages, and without speaking Chinese, without writing Chinese, and without knowing how to sell to Chinese people. But I knew one core principle, and this is that psychology of people never change. So I knew to whom to sell, and I knew exact way how to present my offer to them. I was scaling up my digital businesses to hundreds of thousands of dollars, again understanding two core principles: to whom to sell, so who can benefit from my offer, and the way, when, and how to present my offer. And there is no magic and there is no secret behind that. It's really easy to understand it. But in order to this video be very short, I put all of this together in the school community, which is completely for free. You can join it right now, clicking on the link below in the description box, and you can discover these two principles. It will take you a couple of days to figure it out yourself and to practice it, and then your sales will become consistent. Until then, see you in the school community. Bye for now. when you transition from music world to speaking world, how being in the music world helped you actually?
It helped me tremendously because I have no fear of an audience because I've been in front of an audience my whole life. In fact, when I'm on the stage, that's when I'm most comfortable because I'm very much an introvert. And even with all the work that I did with the band and all the places I've spoken as a speaker and as a speaker coach, I'm very much an introvert. And sometimes people are surprised by that. But the logic behind it is when I'm on a stage, that's my place, that's my spot. And the audience is all there, but this is my place now. And so I'm kind of by myself in my place. It's just that there's all kinds of people out there in the audience. So I'm very comfortable in front of an audience. There's no size of audience that intimidates me. And I think that's because I grew up in front of audiences my whole life. So that was a big advantage. The other advantage was I got really good at working the crowd. You know, when you're playing at the bars and you're going to have all different kinds of people there, and you'll have people who love you and people who heckle you and people who hate you and everything in between. And I got really good because I was the front man. I got really good at working the room and working the crowd, and that was very valuable as a speaker as well.
Would you say that you're then different man on the stage and off the stage?
That's an excellent question, and I think everybody is to a certain degree. Some people are to a huge degree. Some people, I see them when they're on the stage, they turn into somebody completely different, you know, and there's all kinds of science behind why that happens. I'm pretty much the same on the stage as I am off the stage, except for the fact that when I'm on the stage, I have more fun when I'm on the stage. I actually release more of my natural personality when I'm on the stage than I do when I'm off the stage. And for me, it's not a performance, it's a release. When I'm off the stage and I'm in a small group, like, so for example, let's say if I'm doing a training program, I'm on the stage all day, I do my thing. And then my wife, Jane, and I will go out with people for lunch, let's say. And people will often ask Jane, is something wrong with Steve? Like, is Steve okay? Because I'll be very, very quiet because it's not my zone, right? That's not my zone. My zone is in front of an audience. So same person, but different aspects of my personality reveal themselves, I think.
After so many years of experience being on the stage, do you believe that everybody can be a public speaker, keynote speaker, or selling from the stage?
No, not everybody can. No, and there are people that can speak but shouldn't speak. There are people that can't speak but could learn to speak and should. And there are those that just really can't speak and probably shouldn't try. And it has nothing to do with. It has to do with a whole package of things. Number one, I think, and these are in no particular order of importance, but I think number one is there's a confidence that you need to be able to develop to speak in front of an audience effectively. Can anybody develop that confidence? I used to think so. I used to think that anybody should be able to develop these skills. But after being a speaker trainer for 40 years, I have found that there are some people who just, for whatever reason, find it very, very difficult to find that confidence. And a lot of it is about belief systems. Like you had Dr. Peggy McCall on your show, and she talked about belief systems, as did Joe Vitale. And so a lot of folks have these belief systems that are locked in that just prevent them from developing the confidence of the beliefs in themselves. So, so they would really struggle. Then there are others that are at the opposite side, Nick. There are others who just either think so much of themselves that they can't get past their own ego, or they use a persona in order to hide the real self. And so folks like that can be often difficult to train, because the ones that that are very, very much in love with themselves, you can't bring them down to the audience's level, because a lot of folks with that level of ego have a very difficult time getting past their ego. And then there are the others who have the same self-image as those who can't develop the confidence, the lower self-image. A lot of them will put on a persona. I call it third circle speaking, where they are masking their truth self. And it's really difficult for them to expose their true personality. And so can anybody be a public speaker? I don't think anybody can anymore. I used to, but I don't think so anymore.
Can confidence be trained?
I think confidence can be trained under certain conditions. And so here's what I think. Number one is, I don't think confidence can be trained if the person's fundamental belief systems won't allow it. So number one is the person either has to find a way to release the inner blockages or at least be open to the concept of releasing those inner blockages. Now, if that occurs, then what I found is developing confidence is really only, it's really only a result of two things, okay? And that is skill and results. And so if you can develop some skill, and it's the same with anything, same with sales, right? If you can develop some skill, and you take that skill, you apply it, and you get some results. Now you've elevated your belief in the skill. You elevate the skill, you get more results, you elevate your belief in the skill, and confidence grows that way. But where it can get blocked is if you develop the skill and you get the confidence, or you get the results, but your belief system says that was an accident, or I can't do that again, or there's something in there that makes an excuse and it doesn't elevate the level of skill and it doesn't elevate the level of confidence. So I believe it all starts with that inner working. It starts with that inner foundational belief system and your willingness and or ability to release the existing belief system and allow the possibility that if I develop a skill, apply the skill and generate some results, that's a good thing. That means that I can do it again and again and again and again. But if the belief system isn't in place, then it doesn't really happen.
Speaking about beliefs, and I also used before to speak with so many people about beliefs. Is there a belief you had to unlearn to become who you are today?
Yeah, many of them, many. There were many beliefs I had to unlearn.
Can you give me any?
Yeah, I can tell you some, and some of them, I still work on today, 63 years old, and I still work on my belief systems. But so I did a whole lot of work on this for many years. This is a really big story. I'll try and compact it, okay? So there was a lot of years in my life where my business was getting at a certain level and I couldn't get it past that level for no matter what I tried. And I tried everything to get the business past a certain level. And some very strange things happened over a period of time. And I'll condense this story. So I was at a hotel in Las Vegas at an event. I'm going back now about 20 years maybe. And I'm walking down the hallway and a lady passes by and she, just passes like strangers. And she looks at me and she says, Steve, she says, there's something in your childhood that's holding you back. And I said, really? Where does that come from? She introduced herself as a psychic. And she said, as soon as I saw you, there's something holding you back, I could tell. But she said, I can't really see what it is. Now, when it comes to psychics, I'm like a cautious believer, right? Like I believe it can happen, but I've never really seen any evidence it can happen. But just because I haven't seen the evidence doesn't mean it can't happen. So I'm kind of in there. And so she said, I can't really see it. But anyway, that conversation happened and I just forgot about it. And about a year later, I was speaking at an event in Florida and I was sitting at the table with a bunch of people afterwards. It was like dinner with the speaker. And there was a lady sitting across the table from me, and she was making these sort of strange facial expressions at me as we're engaged in conversation with other people. Then there was a break in the conversation, and she said to me, there's something going on with you. There's something happening in your childhood that's holding you back. And she introduced herself as a psychic. So that's twice now that has happened. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? I had a great childhood, And then about maybe a year after that, I was at an event, a Bob Proctor event, actually. And I know you had Brian on your show not long ago. I was at a Bob Proctor event, and the lady behind me at one of the tables stood up to ask Bob a question, and she introduced herself as a psychic. So I said to myself, I'm going to go and ask her right? And so we get on a break. I walk up to the table, and Nick, I kid you not, I walk up to the table and she says, "You want to ask me about your childhood, don't you?" And I said, "Okay, I'm sold." I mean, but she said, "I can't see it. There's something going on there." So I carried that for many years, and there was something bothering me, but I didn't know what it was. And then I met my wife, Jane, now who is now my wife. Now, Jane is not a psychic and never claimed to be a psychic, but Jane got very good at doing mindset work, and she had some techniques using something called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. And I was telling her this story, and she said, "Well, will you let me try and find it?" And I said, "Why not?" So we got on a call. She lived in Montreal. I lived in Ottawa. We got on a call and she found it. Now, all of this is going to answer your question, one of the limiting beliefs. Okay. So what she did was she took me through this process where we went back to my childhood, and I found 3 specific events in my childhood that all related to a specific belief system that was holding me back my whole life. So here are the 3 events very quickly. Number 1 is when I was 2 years old, I had surgery on my right eye because I was cross-eyed. And then for 5 years, I wore a patch on my left eye to work the muscles in the right eye. So I couldn't see anything. So what would happen is I would do things like I would take the patch and I would curl the corner up so that I could see. But my older sister and my parents and the teachers at, in kindergarten and at school, they would all tell me, "You can't do that. You have to put the patch back down." Now that's not a traumatic event for me. I wore a patch for 5 years. It just is what it is. So that by itself doesn't tell me much. But then there was another story when I was maybe 12 years old where I had collected all kinds of information about different countries, and I got them from TV, and I'd order them and they would come. These beautiful colored brochures and books. So I put them in my wagon and I started knocking on doors and selling them to people. "Would you like to buy some information about this country?" And they would pay me, a nickel or a dime or whatever it was. And my mother told me I had to stop doing that because she said, "You didn't pay for those things, so you shouldn't be receiving money for those things." So I stopped doing that. So there was that story. And then there was another story that brought me into high school where I hated everything about high school. And the reason was because what I hated was I had to show up when they say. I could take a break when they said. I had to take lunch when they said. I had to go home when they said I could go home. I had to do homework because they said I had to do homework. So I had all these rules in my mind that I had to follow. So what happened between those 3 stories, we arrived at this belief system, and there are 2 of them in there. And one of them was this. One of them was that if a person in perceived authority said something, that something had to be a certain way, then I accepted that as the truth. And so, for example, if I said to a potential client, "My fee is $1,000, and they say, "Well, that's too expensive," I would say, "Okay, it's too expensive. How about 500? How about 300? So I was always lowering my fees because as soon as somebody said, "No, that's too expensive," I'd say, "Oh, it must be too expensive." So that anytime anybody would object to anything, I would cave to the objection. And that was why my business could only get this high. So that was one thing. That was one belief. The other belief was that I wasn't visible. People couldn't see me because what would happen is I would do things like go into the bank and walk up to the teller, wait in line. I'd walk up to the teller and the teller would turn around and walk away and go on a break. Or I would stand in line at a restaurant waiting, to get a seat, and people behind me would just walk in front of me and get their seat first. Or like these kinds of things would happen all the time, and I allowed it to happen because I didn't have the feeling that I was important enough. And so there was those 2 fundamental beliefs that had to change. And when I changed those beliefs, everything in my life changed. My business changed, my relationships changed, and my finances changed. Everything changed just by me changing those 2 belief systems. So those are 2 of the main ones. That was a big answer to a
Yeah, but very powerful answer. And thank you so much for bringing it up here, because these stories shows a lot. And I'm pretty sure that everybody who think that, okay, I'm polite person, sure you are, and it's nice to be polite, but it can too much cost you if this politeness leads you toward people pleasing and stuff
100%.
like you was dealing with. And thank you so much for bringing that here. You're not just a speaker. You're
Right.
nowadays mentor, coach. When you realize that you weren't only a speaker?
So I don't actually see myself as a speaker as much as a speaking mentor. So I'm a speaking mentor first and a speaker after that. So this happened when I was after I left music. Remember I told you I saw the Zig Ziglar video and I wanted to pursue that. So I joined an organization called the Dale Carnegie Training Company. And the Dale Carnegie Training Company at the time was the biggest training company in the world, and they were teaching public speaking. And so in my mind was, I want to learn how to speak professionally. Because in the band, I'm speaking like a band member on the stage with a lot of people who are drinking. But I wanted to speak to a real audience, you know, that was a business audience or a personal development audience. I wanted to learn how to do it professionally. But what I found during that time is I was working with them and I would watch the instructors in the courses. I would watch them teach. And in my mind, I'm coaching the people. And sometimes the instructor would do things with the person and I would think, oh yeah, I would have done it that way. And sometimes I would think, oh no, I wouldn't have done it that way. And then I did that for a long time, mastering, like watching the instructors. And then one time, one of the instructors came to me and said, Steve, would you like to try coaching somebody? And I said, sure. So I got up there and the guy that I had to coach was, he was the toughest student in the whole class. There was 25 people or so in the class. It was a 14 or 15 week program. We were on like week 6 or 8, something like that. And he was the toughest guy. He didn't want to be there. He was miserable every day that he was there. His boss forced him to be there. He just didn't want to be there. And he was a big, scary guy. But that's the guy that I got to coach. And within about 2 minutes, I had him completely broken through. He told this amazing story that was containing him his whole life. He went into tears and he never looked back. And from that till the end of that program, he was all in every day, and he became an award winner in the class, and he became a stellar student. So during those 2 minutes, that's when I found my gift. That's when I realized what my gift was. I'm an okay speaker. I can speak on any stage with anybody of any level in the world and I'll be just fine. But that's not my gift. My gift is putting other people on the stage and pulling magic out of them that they never knew existed. And then those are the 2 minutes that I found where I went to myself, this is why I'm here. I'm here to do this. That I'm good at this, and this is what I want to pursue. So I spent the rest of my life studying that, mastering that, learning the neuroscience behind it, learning the theory behind it, learning the psychology behind it, learning the body language behind it, learning the theater behind it. And so I spent my entire life, the last 40 years, mastering that. So that's what I do.
Absolutely fabulous. And I can just imagine how different was back that time studying and attending such a courses than nowadays. My question to you is, have you ever felt bad or had any wrong belief exiting on the stage, that people do not listen to you, or they're not connected, they're not interested, and how overcome these moments if you ever had them?
Oh yeah, I've had it many times. And so the reason why that happens, I mean, there are a number of reasons, but for me, when I look back on it, and there was one recently actually, where it's the wrong audience, and for me. And so this is one of the things, one of the many things that, you know, I try and help speakers with is how do you make sure you're in front of the right audience? Because, so I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples. I was hired one time to go and speak to an audience of retired helicopter pilots. And what they wanted me to teach them was storytelling. But these pilots had zero interest in storytelling at all, none of them. And so I couldn't get them engaged. It was a complete waste of their time, a complete waste of my time, and we never connected. And so all I can do is walk away. And in my mind, the way I try and get past this is I look back and I ask myself, did I do everything possible to provide value to that audience? And sometimes, you know, usually it's, yes, sometimes it's no, I could have changed this, I could have changed that. But the mindset I go in with every single audience is I put myself in this mindset of service. And this is what I encourage all speakers to do. Put yourself in a mindset of service to that audience and do everything that must be done in order to provide the value that audience deserves. So after that group with the helicopter pilots, I thought back and I said, did I do everything possible possible that I could do to provide value. There is a point in the exchange of value when value needs to be delivered, but then it needs to be received. And so the responsibility shifts. So if I'm the speaker, I have a responsibility to deliver value to you in a certain way, but there's a point where it's your responsibility to receive it and extract the value from what I deliver. And so in my mind is, did I do everything to deliver the value and make that available to them? And my answer to myself was yes. So now I can shrug it off. They didn't extract value because they didn't accept the value. And then, so there was that one. And then there have been times when I've left the stage and say, man, I just didn't do well. I didn't give it my best. I was weak on this, weak on that. I didn't give them what they deserve. There's many times when I do that, but I'm my own worst critic, as most people are. So I'm very strict with myself that way. The most recent one was a virtual presentation to a room full of chiropractors. Now, I've spoken to chiropractors many times, chiropractor associations and networking groups, and I have many clients that I've trained that are chiropractors. And for some reason, I don't know why, for some reason, there were 30 or so people on that Zoom call and not a single one of them would come on camera. So all I was doing was looking at black screens. And when I do these sessions, they're very interactive. So I'm getting people up on the screen with me and we're interacting and we're doing some laser coaching and we're having fun. And it's very, very interactive, but the whole screen just stayed black for 60 minutes. Nobody would engage. I would ask them questions, say, so if this is you, type me in the chat window. You know how you do that, when you're on. Nobody would chat. Like it was a disaster, a complete and total disconnect. To this day, I don't know why, but I'll look back and I ask myself, did I do everything possible at the time to put value in front of them? And I think back, and I can think of probably some things that I should have changed, but I feel good about the fact that if somebody watches that video, they're going to get some value out of what I've done. So yeah, there are lots of times when I walk away either thinking I did everything I could, or no, I didn't do it. It's my fault. I didn't get it right.
Steve, one thing you mentioned, which triggered complete my attention in this answer, and this is that so many people can give the value, but when they're selling from the stage, they can miss converting part. How do you use story, not just to inspire, but to convert? Okay,
big question. First of all, I don't believe your story does convert. So we can have a whole discussion around this. So I'll just sort of go down the path, and if you want to interrupt me, you just stop me, okay? Because I can go down a whole. Okay, all right. So let's start with this. Here's the misconception that I see speakers make who want to convert. Now, let's start with this. I'm not talking about getting out there and doing the high pressure, multi-value stacked buy now offer. That's not what I'm talking about. Although we can do that and we can talk about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the expert, the coach, the consultant, the facilitator, the mentor, who wants to get in front of an audience, provide real value to the audience, and have the audience come up later and say, I want to talk to you. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's where most of the misconceptions happen. Number one is this. Most speakers think that if I get in front of an audience and if I have a great story, then they're going to want to talk to me. Or if I get in front of an audience and I show them how great I am, then, and if I'm really good as a speaker, they're going to want to talk to me. Or they'll think, I'm going to show them my 3 pillars to this, or my 4 secrets, or my 5 strategies, or my unique approach. I'm going to tell them all about my, my one-of-a-kind system. And when they see how great it is, they're going to want to hire me. The problem with all of that is it never works. None of those things are what sell. Now, here's the issue. You asked about stories, so I'll start there. The problem with the stories, and I've seen it taught by every speaker coach in the entire world teaches stories. Here's the problem. The stories that are most often told by the speakers do not reach the desired outcome that leads people to convert. And here's why. Your audience needs to feel 3 things from you in order to maximize conversions. Now, you'll get the accidents. You're always going to get somebody who comes up and says, that was interesting, I want to talk to you. But if you really want to convert at a much higher level, 3 things absolutely must happen in your talk. And they have to happen in a certain order. At least the first thing has to happen. Your audience needs to feel understood by you. which means the audience needs to sit there and think like, they're listening to Nick speak, so that Nick gets me, Nick understands me. And if I'm telling you my story, what I'm trying to do is get you to understand me. And the direction's going the wrong way. Now, here's the argument. And I know anybody watching this is thinking, no, Steve, that's not true, because they will relate to your story. They will relate to your story if it's told a specific way. Now, I'm not saying not to use your story, but the way that it's done incorrectly is people are taught, let me tell you the thing that happened to me. Let me tell you what I learned from it. And let me tell you how you can use those lessons. And the problem with that is that's not actually about the audience. And this is a concept that I try and teach speakers, and it's very, very difficult to explain it, but I'll give you an example. The story you tell has to be the audience's story, not yours. Now, the story may be you reporting on your experience, but you've got to tell the story in a way that it's the audience's story. So I'll give you a quick example. So there's a story that I use all the time. And when I get in front of the audience, I'll often ask this question. I'll say, put up your hand if you or somebody you know is in the market for a tennis instructor. And I'll go like this. Now, let's say I've got 100 people in the audience. Say, put up your hand if you or somebody you know is in the market for a tennis instructor. Just go like this. Now, if there's 100 people in the audience, usually there's not a single hand that goes up. Sometimes there's maybe one, especially here in North America, the hands just don't go up. In Europe, there might be some more hands go up, but usually there's very few. Sure. So what I'll do is then I'll tell the audience, let's say 2 hands go up. I'll tell the audience, I'll say, I'm going to guess that at least 25 of you are either in the market for a tennis instructor today, or you know somebody who is. And now they're thinking, well, how are you going to prove that? So now I haven't even told the story yet, right? But now I've got their attention because I've put something out there that's intriguing to them, and I've put a challenge out there. So now I've got some intrigue in the audience, some mystique. So now I've set the stage, proverbial stage, to tell the story. So here's what the story I tell them. I'll say, let me tell you about Brian. So Brian came to me about 20 years ago, and he says, Steve, I'm going to all the networking events. I'm shaking all the hands. I'm meeting all the people. I'm making all the phone calls. And he said, I'm just not getting the business that I need. And I said, well, Brian, what do you do? He said, I'm a tennis instructor. And as we looked around the room, you can see the market for a tennis instructor is very small. So we taught Brian this fundamental principle about speaking to, for your business. And I said to him, anytime you speak in front of an audience, whether it's an audience of 1 or it's an audience of 1,000, you're positioning yourself in one of 2 ways. And there are only 2. You're either positioning yourself as somebody they need or somebody they don't. So when Brian says, I'm a tennis instructor, he's positioning himself as somebody they don't need, as we can see by the lack of hands. So we taught Brian a different approach. So now if you saw Brian today and you said, Brian, what do you do? He'd say something like this. He'd say, well, you know how sometimes kids have so much energy, they're bouncing off the walls and they're making all kinds of noise and they're so excited, and the parents get so frustrated because they have no idea what to do with these kids. He'd say, well, what I do is I take kids of any age, I bring them on a tennis court, I absolutely exhaust them, and then I hand them back to their parents. Then I ask the room, put up your hand if you just might know somebody who's in the market for a tennis instructor. And all of a sudden, half the hands or all the hands in the room go up. So I play that a little bit. I say, keep your hand up, keep your hand up. And I said 25, right? So I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As soon as I pass the number I said, I've made my point. And so now what I do is I'll say, that's what I do. Okay? I help you get, turn I'm not interested to tell me more in a matter of seconds by helping you change the way you speak. So all of this to go back to your concept of stories. There's nothing about me in there. There's no story about me in there. The story is about Brian. And I told the story in a way that it becomes the audience's story. Because as I'm talking about the kids bouncing off the walls, making all kinds of noise, the audience is going, that's my grandkids, or that's my kids, or that's my neighbor's kids, or that's my nephew. And they have somebody they can relate to. So I'm telling their story. And then as soon as they see the first question has nobody say yes, and then the second time everybody says yes, what they're thinking to themselves is, I want that for my business. So I'm telling Brian's story, but I'm really telling the audience's story. So if we're going to talk about stories, we could talk about it for hours. But here's the thing. The story is one component of getting the audience to feel like this speaker gets me. This speaker understands me. And without that happening, a story is just a narrative, because everybody who can draw breath has a story. But very, very few people are taught to select stories strategically, tell them tactically, so that they bring the audience on their own journey, not on the speaker's journey. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
This is absolutely brilliant. First time ever hear that strategy, and I try to zoom out and to see all that picture where you're not saying your story, hey, I'm Steve, I had yesterday this and that, but you're allocating story in the way that they truly can say, that's me, and they can see themselves in those shoes. This is brilliant. And thank you so much for bringing this up, because I want to ask you something now around that concept.
Sure.
Is it a story what makes speaker or seller unforgettable?
No. It's not the story, it's not the content, it's not the dazzle, it's not the presence. All of those things contribute, but the one thing that makes a speaker memorable, that was the question, right? What makes them memorable is a combination of if I'm in the audience, how did you change my perspective on my life, and how did you make me feel about it? That's what makes you stand out. And if you do all those other things, like the story and the dazzle and, and the great presence and the laughing and the crying and the getting up and the getting down and the yelling and all of those things that we do as speakers, all of those great things, they will keep the audience's attention. And that's a good thing. That's a great asset. But what matters is, as soon as you get off the stage and the next speaker gets on the stage, if they draw more attention to themselves than you did, you're forgotten. But what will happen is, if you are able to fundamentally change something in that audience, if you are able to change their perspective about the nature of their condition, if you can rattle a belief, if you can have them question that which they thought to be true before, if you can have them resetting their expectations for themselves where they are bothered by it, where if you affect something in them that fundamentally changes who they believe they can become, and if you get them beyond their intellect and into their imagination, where they have a feeling, a drive to act on this new thoughts you've given them, that's the package that makes you memorable. And what you say and the stories you tell, all of those collectively should be designed to reach that outcome. You want the audience to feel, I've never thought of that before. I've never looked at it that way before. This has really changed something. Just like a moment ago when I asked you, I said, is this making sense? You went, this is brilliant. That's what you want your audience to do. That's what's going to make you memorable, not because I gave you something interesting to think about, but because I went past your intellect into your imagination and I affected you at a visceral level, and now you have this whole new way, a whole new perspective. That's what makes you memorable.
That's very well said. Simply because people perceive the things differently, and once you use and play on especially on their curiosity, you got them. And this is absolutely fabulous. We are all witnessing that AI is everywhere. I recently realized that probably the most common sales objection in 2025 is this an AI, or can I do it with AI? And I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on that? How do you think AI will reshape the art of public speaking, and will it actually touch in there or not?
Yeah, so here's let me tell you my initial thoughts on AI. And I think and this is fairly common for people in our industry, I think, is, my initial thoughts on AI were very, very resistant, because I can see where AI is going to replace my responsibility to think for myself, right? And that was a big resistance point for me. But then I thought, if I don't learn how to use AI, I'm going to be left behind. So I've been, I use a lot of AI now, but here's where I use AI. I use AI for a number of things. Number one is research. So if I'm making a claim about something, I want to have access to research to back that claim up. So I've got more access to research than I've ever had before. So I use it for research. The other thing is this, and this will be a little bit difficult to explain. But one of the things that I offer people is they will pay me to write their message, the one message that does everything I just said to the audience, right? So let's say you came to me, let's say as an example, Nick, and you said, Steve, I want to have that message that people walk out of the room rattled. I want them to have a whole new set of questions about themselves. I want to be the person that they need. So when they walk out the room, they think, I need to talk to Nick. So, and let's say you hire me to craft that message for you. The way I use AI is, again, it's almost entirely research, is I take all of your ideas. So for example, I would sit down with you, let's say for 90 minutes on Zoom, and I would ask you a bunch of questions like you're asking me questions. But I know what questions to ask because I'm looking for a very specific outcome. And I know what that outcome is, so I know what questions to ask, and I know when I've received the answers I need. Then what happens is I do this in Zoom, and Zoom records everything for me in the transcript file. So I take the transcript file, I bring it into AI, and now what I'll do is I'll say, okay, give me a list of Nick's primary desired outcomes for his talk, and it'll list them. Then I'll say, okay, craft for me a speaking style guide for Nick based on our conversation. It'll craft a speaking style guide for you. Then I'll ask it, what are Nick's primary ideas? And then it'll list the primary ideas all from our transcript. And so I'm extracting all these pieces that I need. And then what I'll do, once I get all of these pieces from the file, then I will use my format and put them all together and create your message for you. And then what I'll do is once the message is created, I will fact check it. I'll say, does this message align with Nick's original desired outcomes? Yes, it does. Is this message crafted according to Nick's speaking style guide? Yes, it is. Does this message go out to the universe and validate the veracity of this message with whatever I need to, with whether it's neuroscience or whether it's psychology or whether it's sales skills or whatever, because I can find that now. So then I can take the message and I can validate the veracity of that message. So that whole process will take me about 12 hours to do that. And then what'll happen is you and I would get back on Zoom, and then I will teach you how to present it. And so I use AI to help me implement my systems that I've designed and created over 40 years in the business. So will AI replace me? I can't see it happening because it doesn't know my design. AI is going to deliver to you exactly what you ask it to. And the key with AI that I've found is knowing what to ask it. And so I know the questions to ask it because I designed the system. So that's how I use AI. So I don't see how it can replace me, because in order for it to work, you got to know what questions to ask.
Absolutely. And I see it in the way that AI, it actually helps you and preserve your time. Considering that AI is rapidly coming to our lives and overtaking almost everything except maybe personal brand and storytelling, in my opinion, how do you think that experts can preserve their authenticity when automation is everywhere?
Yeah. So I think one way is this, and I do run into this, and I'm seeing this now more and more. It was kind of like, Nick, when PowerPoint first came out. Right? Speakers went from using overhead machines to PowerPoint, and all of a sudden everybody was using PowerPoint. And what happened was people became dependent on PowerPoint. And I saw it so many times, even if at my own events, speakers would show up, guest speakers, and they'd say, I left my PowerPoint on my flash drive. I don't have it. And I can't count the number of times where I've said to them, well, can you do it without the PowerPoint? No, I can't. I need my PowerPoint. And so the dependence on PowerPoint came to the point, and I think it's still at the point where many speakers, I would say most speakers, are paralyzed without their PowerPoint slides, right? So I teach speakers never to use, I never use PowerPoint. I never have. Maybe one slide here or there for certain reasons. But when I'm teaching speakers and when I hold my own events where I bring my clients in and put them on stages, nobody uses PowerPoint because I want my clients, my speakers to be able to draw the audience's attention here, not up there. I want them to learn this. Okay. And so to your question with PowerPoint, the question was, how do you maintain your authenticity? Don't use it. Keep it off the stage. Use it maybe to generate some ideas, but get it off the stage and be the speaker and draw from this and develop this. And it's the same with AI. I've seen speakers now, and just recently, where they get on the stage and they have this immaculately created AI fabulous set of slides or visuals or effects, and they fail. And then they're stuck. They got nothing to say. I was at a major conference in Costa Rica in December where I was speaking, and the keynote speaker, the opening speaker, who is the big star of the show, got paralyzed because her AI slides wouldn't work, and she had nothing to say. And I've seen it happen over and over and over and over. So the only reason why a speaker, in my judgment, should be replaced by AI is if they replace themselves with AI and don't develop the skill to actually be a speaker. And a lot of speakers have come under this illusion and is perpetuated to some degree by the meeting industry, where it's no longer a speech, it's a production now. Now it's a play. Now it's a theater show, right? And so if that's where you want to go as a speaker, then go there. I mean, I'm not against it, but your question was, how do they maintain authenticity? By being a speaker and not relying on PowerPoint slides and not relying on AI shows and not relying on technology. Get on a stage with a microphone and speak.
You mentioned
that's how you can be authentic.
Thank you. And you mentioned about AI replicating. So out of context, give me an extension. If somebody trained AI to clone Steve Lowell, what they couldn't ever replicate?
They can't ever replicate my personality. They can't replicate my spontaneity. They can't replicate my passion. They can't replicate the way that I engage with an audience. They can't replicate the way I bring an audience member up and coach them and turn them into a great speaker in 3 minutes. They can't replicate that. So there are a million things they can't replicate. What they can replicate possibly is this and the voice, and that's about it. That's about all, and maybe some body language, and that's it. That's all they can replicate.
Does this mean that we still have unfair advantage over AI when it comes to selling from the stage?
Yeah, so selling from the stage is another extension. So let's go back to selling from the stage, because I mentioned that there were 3 things that the audience needs to feel, and we only talked about 1. So yes. 3 things that the audience needs to feel. The first one is the audience needs to feel understood by you. Now, if they know that what's up there is an AI, then there's no understanding there. They know that it's mechanical, right? So they don't feel understood by an AI. What they feel is they know that it's false. It's just like, it would be like having, a romantic affair with an AI generated, woman. It's not real, right? So the audience, in order to really sell, the audience needs to feel legitimately understood by the speaker. That's number 1. But number 2 is the audience needs to feel safe. They need to feel safe with you, which means they need to feel that you're not just there to separate them from their money. They need to feel safe that they can actually talk to you, that you will listen to them. Because here's the thing, this is another misconception. Your audience doesn't care about how much you know until they show that you care about their problem. So there used to be somebody, I don't remember who it was, that said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right? And so an AI avatar can't care, can't demonstrate caring. And so the audience, when it comes to making I'm not talking about little purchases, but a major investment in coaching kind of thing, the audience doesn't care how much you know until they have some idea that you can actually care about them. And let me give you a real life example about that. Okay, so I have some skin cancer on my nose from sun damage. So I have some on my nose. I go to a dermatologist. Now, I trust the dermatologist's knowledge because they're a dermatologist.
Yep.
But all that dermatologist wanted to do is hack off a chunk of my nose and biopsy it. Okay. And I'm trying to tell them, no, this is what I've been doing. I want you to understand what I'm experiencing. And my meeting is 2 minutes because all she wants to do is hack off a chunk of my nose. So I'm not going to that one. So then I go to another dermatologist and I'm trying to explain. I want to explain to you what I'm experiencing so you can give me some options. And so I'm in that office for 2 minutes. No, we need to biopsy your nose. And so that particular dermatologist, I trust their knowledge because they're a dermatologist. But they're not taking any effort, any time to hear my version. They're not making me feel safe.
Yeah, there's a certain process.
Right. I go to a third dermatologist. This one, I go in, I'm in the chair for 45 minutes. She takes pictures. She draws little circles. She explores everything. She asked me 1,000,000 questions. And then she said, let me go through all this. I'll get back to you with a plan. Now I feel safe. So I went and used her. I trusted all of their knowledge, but she's the only one that made me feel safe. So if we take that and we transfer it to speaking, part of your job is to make the audience feel safe. And you need to make them feel safe by giving them a feeling that they can talk to you, that they can engage with you, that they can ask you questions, that they can tell you what they're experiencing, that they can give you, share with you what they're going through. And there's no conceivable way an AI bot will ever elicit that response. So that's number two. So number one was the audience needs to feel safe, needs to feel understood. AI can't do that. The audience needs to feel safe. AI can't do that. And the audience needs to feel, the third thing is they need to feel confident in your ability to actually do what you say you can do. And so with the first two dermatologists, I was pretty confident that they could each hack a chunk off my nose because they had a knife there ready to do it, right? But I wasn't confident that they were going to help me with the actual condition of the skin cancer that I experienced. But that third one, I felt very, very safe, and I'm pretty darn sure she can do what she says she's going to do. In fact, she's done it. And so as a speaker, you got to take the audience on that journey. They need to feel, man, you know what? Nick really gets me. I think I could actually work with Nick. I feel like he'd listen to me and I can talk to him. And I'm pretty confident that Nick can do what he says he's going to do. I need to talk to Nick. Those are our jobs if you want to convert as a speaker. And again, I'm not talking about selling, something at the back of the room that's worth $100,000 and selling it for $19.95 today only. I'm not talking about that. That's a whole other art form. I'm talking about speaking in front of an audience, providing legitimate value, and at the end of it, having them come up to you and say, I need to talk to you. And I just don't see AI arriving at those outcomes because they are visceral outcomes.
Does this mean that we're having unfair advantage over AI in the fact that people can feel that we care about them, which they probably cannot feel about an AI, and that it's not only about being trust, but do they feel safe going with us on the journey, right?
Yeah. Now, there are some things that I feel safe with AI. I don't know if I'd feel safe with AI cutting me open yet. I don't know about that. I think that there are some things that people can feel safe. AI, it sounds like I'm against AI. I'm not. I'm very, very much in favor of AI, but I just I don't foresee a point where AI can replace speakers as speakers. I can see where AI can replace speakers as entertainment. I can see that. I can see where, instead of having a speaker, let's have an AI show, but there's a difference between being a speaker and being entertainment. Now, there are gray areas because some speakers are entertaining, like a comedy, or whatever. I could see an AI replacing a comedian because all the comedian's after is laughter, and an AI bot can get the laughter. They're just telling the jokes same way. Yeah. Right. But as a speaker, you see, here's a fundamental principle, Nick. The purpose of speaking is not about transferring information. The purpose of speaking is about transferring emotion. See, my job as a speaker is not to teach you what I know, although that happens, But my job as a speaker, more than that, is to get you to feel about my message the way I feel about my message. It's a transference of emotion. So oftentimes what will happen is I'll get people come to me and they'll say, Steve, I'm going to be your easiest student because I've been a teacher for 30 years. I said, well, you got 30 years of bad habits to break, because here's the difference. You see, teaching is about a transference of information. Let me teach you what I know and what you need to know. That's teaching.
Yeah.
Okay? Coaching, right. Coaching is about, let me get you better at what you're doing because of my knowledge. So let me coach you to get you better. It's a transference of skill. Okay? That's coaching. Mentoring is about, let me show you how to be me. Let me help you develop the skills that I have developed. That's mentoring. Speaking is about, let me get you to feel about my message the way I feel about my message, so that we can step into one of the other roles. And so too many speakers think, if I get up there and if I teach them everything I know, if I solve their problems, and on my sessions, I ask this question all the time, Nick. I ask the question of, what is your role as a speaker? What's your responsibility? And so they go to the chat window and the answers are always the same. To provide value is always the first one. So then I challenge that. Okay, what is value? What does value mean? It's just a catch-all phrase. It doesn't mean anything by itself. What is value actually? So then they get into things like this: solve problems, provide, teach them something new, educate them, entertain them, make them laugh, and all of these different things. And all of those things are correct. But if you want to convert, the worst thing you can do is solve the audience's problem. That's the word, because as soon as you solve their problem or give them the perception that you have solved their problem, they don't need you, and off they go. They don't need you anymore.
Exactly.
But if I can make you feel about my message the way I feel about my message, which means I want you to feel disrupted. I want you to feel compelled. I want you to feel challenged. I want you to feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable. I want you to have intrigue. How can I fix this problem that I didn't even know I had? Finally, I can understand why I'm not getting the results I need. I need to talk to Steve. That's the result we're looking for. And that's what speaking is for.
Fabulous. And thank you for breaking this down in between coaching, mentoring, and speaking. It's unbelievable. Like, first time ever hear of that concept myself.
Good.
Steve, is there anything success not gave you, but you thought that it will give you?
Okay. So let me make sure I understand the question. Is there anything success has not given me that I thought it would give me?
That's right. That's correct.
Boy, let me think about that. I don't think so. I will probably come up with something at 3 a.m, so thank you for that. But right now, I don't think so, because I was never one to think that I would ever stop doing this. Like, I'm not working. I have no retirement plan, because if I were to retire from something, I would retire to this, right? And so
Love it.
I don't think so, because I never intended to stop doing this. I never intended, I don't think, to reach a point in my life where I would say, okay, I'm done. I made it. Woohoo, good for me. I don't think I ever had that intention.
Awesome. I have a couple of more questions here to ask you, considering that personal and truth reflection on your journey, because all what you give us here, it's a masterclass of speaking on the stage, selling from the stage, and how people actually should keep those connections nowadays, not just by, I will tell you the story, you might relate to that one. And I want to ask you, if we go a little bit back and now reflecting to all your journey, what are you most afraid that people will never truly understand about what you're teaching?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And I'll tell you why, because there is something specific, and it's very difficult to explain. So we were talking about the message. Okay. I call it the differentiating message. So think of it this way. If you think about let's say a signature talk, think about it as a clock. Okay. And so you've got the clock, and the hands are going, around the clock. And let's say every 10 minutes is a different part of the talk. So you have the introduction, you've got, you got the premise of the talk, and you've got a story, and then you got these pieces that go around a clock. So that's the talk. But at the heart of the clock, in the middle, where the hands meet, right in the middle, what the hands come out of, right there, that's what I call the differentiating message. There is a fundamental message around which the talk is built. That fundamental message, that's the piece that makes the audience, that challenges their beliefs, that rattles their expectations, that resets their paradigms. That's the belief that disrupts their thinking. And that right there, that's the message. And so to get people to understand what happens in that piece of the message, because anybody can write a talk. Start with an introduction and then start your story and go to the conflict and then talk about the decision you made and then talk about what you did to solve it and then go to the lessons and what are the consequences of inaction. Like, anybody can do that. But what's often missing 90% of the time is that core piece that rattles the belief of the audience. And that's right in the center of the clock. And so I've spent decades studying that piece. And I wrote a book about it called Deep Thought Strategy. That's my process, Deep Thought Strategy. And Deep Thought Strategy is about that. It's about going deeper, thinking deeper into your expertise than you ever have before, and finding pieces in there that are profoundly unique to you, and putting those pieces together in a way that people have never heard it before. And that is your differentiating message. Now, the purpose of that differentiating message is to take the audience on a very specific journey, step by step by step. So what's my biggest fear, I think, is that is the piece I have a hardest time explaining to people and getting them to understand that. And so that's why when people hire me to write that differentiating message, that used to be a 3 or 4 month engagement, because it took me that long to get all the information out of them and to organize it and to package it and put it together and teach them how to deliver it, because it's extremely tactical. Now I can do it in 12 hours with the help of AI. But even now, the difficult part is getting them to understand why things happen the way they do within that differentiating message. Because every word, every phrase is tactically and specifically chosen to take the audience on a very specific journey, so that at the end by the time you're finished the talk, you've gone all the way around the clock on your talk, the audience has that piece of messaging. That's the piece that makes them go, I've never thought of it that way before. I need to talk to that one. So that's I think what I'm probably most, am I afraid of it? I don't know. I'm not afraid of it, but I think that's the one thing I can't seem to teach that to anybody. People are always asking me, why don't you, train some coaches? Because I do it all myself. And the problem is I never found anybody that I could get them to understand that piece.
Very, very interesting and deep. By the way, I would need to sit down and to think about that for an hour or even longer to fully break it down in my own perspective and understand. Steve, for the very last, I want to ask you, if people who are listening to this or watching to this episode thinking about, okay, from now on, I'm going differently to appear when I'm speaking in front of the stage, selling on the webinar, selling on the masterclass, what is one message you want to left them with in order to they become better version of themselves and to better gain not only trust from the audience, but making their audience feel safe?
Yeah, I think, that's a big question. There are many things, but the fundamental piece, I think, we've already mentioned them here, so I'll bring them up to the surface. I think the very most important piece is the understanding that speaking is not about a transference of information. That's not your job. You'll do that, it happens, but that's not your function. Your function is speaking is a transference of emotion. Your job is to get past their intellect into their imagination and get them to feel about your message the way you feel about your message. So that's the most important understanding. And then right underneath that, in order to help that happen, put yourself, anytime you speak, put yourself in a mindset of service to the audience. Now, what that means is forget about trying to memorize and recite a speech. And forget about your PowerPoint slides. Forget about how you look. I mean, dress properly and all, but get your mind off of you and your performance and put your mind in service to that audience. And your question is, how can I reach that audience in a level that is actually going to affect them somehow? And that may mean you have to start all over. I don't know. For most people, it does. But that mindset of service is mission critical as a speaker. So speaking is not about information. It's a transference of information. It's about a transference of emotion. And the way to start transferring that emotion is get into a mindset of service for every single audience that you get in front of. Now, I could go on all day, but those are probably the two that rise to the top.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all your wisdom you shared today with us. I really, honestly, thank you for all of this.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for asking, and congratulations. I've been watching your podcast episodes. You got some great guests, some great content, and I'll tell you, it's an honor for me to be part of that lineup. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, Steve.